You know, son, there ain't no dog as good as Sounder. In all the years we've been tracking coons and possums in these woods, he ain't never told one of them up yet. Good evening, everyone. This is Stone Gasman live from New York City. And tonight we are going to be doing a 50th anniversary audio commentary for Sounder, directed by Martin Ritt, starring Paul Winfield, Cicely Tyson, and young Kevin Hooks. And I've been meaning to do this film. I mean, ever since last year. I had meant to do it last year when I was doing 50th anniversary commentaries for 1972 releases. It came out in September of 1972, and eventually got several Academy Award nominations like Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. However, unfortunately, it didn't win any awards, and it basically has been kind of little seen outside of maybe a few VHS releases and DVD releases. I mean, for many years, it was actually difficult to find a copy of Sounder because the rights had jumped around to several different hands, and there's still a sequel that's missing in action, got lost in a black hole somewhere. And so there's still a lot of unanswered questions as far as Sounder in terms of its distribution and ultimately its reception nowadays. Because I hate to think that something like Sounder is forgotten, but I mean, it had its time in 1972. And the critics really liked it. The audience really liked it. It was a hit at the box office. It made money. I mean, it had a $1.9 million budget, and it made about 16.9. So it did well, and it was generally liked by the public. But unfortunately, it's been little seen or discussed in many years. And I want to change that tonight. At any rate, so I am paused on the 20th Century Fox logo. If you want to watch the movie Sounder along with me, there is a copy that you can watch on YouTube, thankfully for free. Although if you want to rent through Amazon, go ahead. But luckily, this movie is available for free right there. And I had seen this movie before, 15 years ago. And on top of all that, I actually wrote a whole article online about the 2008 DVD release, which I will certainly talk about as we go through this commentary. But at any rate, why don't we go ahead and get started here? I'm actually all ready to go. I imagine that, people are probably exhausted after the Super Bowl, so I'm not going to expect a huge turnout tonight. But nonetheless, I just read that basically the Eagles lost just barely to the Kansas City Chiefs, who made an upset with 38-35, something like that. But for while you guys were watching the Super Bowl, I was listening to Avery Brooks from Captain Sisko from Star Trek Voyager. I was listening to him read the book on Audible. So instead of watching the Super Bowl, I decided to do an audiobook of Sounder by William H. Armstrong, spoken by Avery Brooks, and it was awesome. It was awesome indeed. So paused on the 20th Century Fox logo, and we can go ahead on the count of 3, 2, 1, and play. This film indeed was distributed by 20th Century Fox, although what we'll eventually discover is that the movie was actually produced by Mattel. Now, as you can see there, Radnitz and Mattel production, a Robert B. Radnitz and Martin Ritt film. Yes. So we should go ahead and start with the producer of this film, Sounder. There's the credit among a beautiful backdrop. Gorgeous cinematography by Chinatown's John A. Alonzo as we open up the film here. But the producer, Robert B. Radnitz, let's start with him first, since this is in fact a Radnitz production. But he was an American film producer, best known for his production of the family films Sounder and Where the Lilies Bloom. He produced several movies, many of which were adapted from children's literature. He moved to Hollywood, starting with 20th Century Fox as a script consultant. And in the 1960s, he produced several films with director James B. Clarke. One of his first productions was this 1960 film, A Dog of Flanders, about a Belgian farm boy who aspires to be an artist. The film helped to develop Radnitz's reputation as a maker of high-quality movies for children and their parents, according to critic Valerie J. Nelson of the Los Angeles Times. Now, in 1969, Radnitz there's John A. Alonzo's credit right there. The cinematography in this movie is just eye-popping, as we'll soon discover here as we go. Music composed and performed by Taj Mahal. We'll talk about him as well. But going back to Robert B. Radnitz, he had produced a movie in 1969 called My Side of the Mountain. And it was basically, here again, it was based on a book, like Sounder. It's, distributed in schools and everything, except maybe Florida, but we won't go there. But yeah, they, these, middle school level books that the kids would read. And My Side of the Mountain is actually a very interesting one because essentially it's about this, this teenage version of Thoreau who decides to actually leave his parents and go out into the wilderness to see if he can actually, make it out there or not. And and he also raises a peregrine falcon at the same time. And this movie, My Side of the Mountain, it came out the same year as a very famous UK film called Kes, which was also about a boy raising a peregrine fountain. But I love them both, and I think they actually work as a double feature. But he did My Side of the Mountain, which I really, really liked. And then in May of 1970, he started collaborating with Martin Ritt, the director, and they went to toy maker Mattel. This is where Mattel comes in, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, they bring in Mattel to form a partnership to produce films marketed to children. And My Side of the Mountain was one of the first ones to do that. And now we have Sounder, which of course is taken from a Newbery medal-winning novel of the same name by William H. Armstrong. And there's director Martin Ritt's credit right there. Now, William H. Armstrong, he was an American writer of children's literature and educator, best known for his novel Sounder, which won the Newbery Medal. He was born in Lexington, Virginia in 1911, was the third child born to Howard Grattan Armstrong, a farmer, and his wife, Ida Morris. He had a difficult time in school, being a small child with asthma and glasses. While his father taught him to work hard, his mother taught Armstrong to love stories. Quote, "No one told me the Bible was not for young readers, so I found some exciting stories in it. Not until years later did I understand why I liked the Bible stories so much. It was because everything that could possibly be omitted was omitted. There was no description of David, so I could be like David." Armstrong used the art of omission in his own writing of Sounder, which he wrote based on an account told around his family's kitchen table in Virginia. One story in particular, told by an elderly black man about Argus, the faithful dog of Odysseus, fascinated him. The dog recognized his master when he returned home and after being away for 20 long years. The story stayed with him throughout his life and ultimately was the inspiration for his award-winning children's book Sounder, which was published in 1969. And that came out the same year as the film My Side of the Mountain, which Radnitz produced as well. And here we have there's young Kevin Hooks, who in many ways, I mean, he's not quite the star of the movie, but damn, does he make the biggest impression. Uh, and and here we have the wonderful Paul Winfield playing his father. I had talked about Paul Winfield in length in a commentary I did last year for a movie called Mike's Murder from 1984, but we'll certainly talk about Paul Winfield again. And we are soon to meet his wife, played by the beautiful Cicely Tyson. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In 1956, at the request of his school headmaster, William H. Armstrong published his first book, a study guide called Study is Hard Work. Armstrong followed this title with numerous other self-help books, and in 1963 he was awarded the National School Bell Award of the National Association of School Administrators for distinguished service in the interpretation of education. In 1969, Armstrong published his masterpiece, an 8-chapter novel titled Sounder, about an African-American sharecropping family. Praised by critics, Sounder won the John Newbery Medal and the Lewis Carroll Shelf Award in 1970 and was adapted into a major motion picture in 1972. Among his other novels are The Sour Land, a sequel to Sounder, though not labeled as such. The Mills of God and the McLeod Place, the story of a multi-generational family farm displaced by the construction of the Blue Ridge Parkway. He continued to be prolific in his writing output, mainly publishing books with historical biblical main characters such as Hadassah, Esther the Orphan Queen, 1972, and The Education of Abraham Lincoln in 1974. Hampton-Sydney College awarded Armstrong an honorary Doctor of Letters in 1986. He died in 1999 at his home in Kent, Connecticut, at the age of 87. His Newbery Medal currently resides in the William Armstrong Children's Book section at Bort's Library at Armstrong's alma mater, Hampton-Sydney College. Yeah. And so, yeah, it appears like Sounder is the only one with any kind of real detail behind it. But he did write other things like Warrior in Two Camps, Study Tactics, Peoples of the Ancient World, Tools of Thinking, 87 Ways to Help Your Child in School, self-help books like that. So that's what he generally published, outside of just, the one novel, which is Sounder. But he did write a sequel to Sounder. Now, it was not filmed, but because apparently the sequel to Sounder that maybe or may not still exist, like I said, it has not, from what I understand, it has nothing to do with his book, The Sour Land. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have given him credit in the posters and everything. Now, we mentioned earlier that, of course, this opens up with a Radmitz. Well, we've just talked about the producer, Robert B. Radmitz, and also Mattel Productions. Okay, now, yes, this is indeed a Mattel production years before Mattel Films became even a thing. And look, if you think that Mattel was big before, stand by, because we're about to enter a new era when it comes to films from Mattel. Now, but there used to be a Mattel Films division, actually, that was started in 2013 as Mattel Playground Productions. And before that, all that really existed were these Radnitz Mattel productions like Sounder, as well as Where the Lilies Bloom, which that film, incidentally, was directed by William A. Graham, who would later direct Part 2 of Sounder. And Where the Lilies Bloom is an adaptation of the novel by same name, written by Bill and Vera Cleaver. And let's see. As of 2020, it is streaming free on Amazon Prime, and in July of 2022, it was released on both DVD and 1080p Blu-ray. Well, now, great. Now we're just waiting on Sounder to get a 1080p Blu-ray. That would be very, very nice. But yeah, that was the second film that was produced by Robert B. Radnitz and Mattel. But that film, Where the Lilies Bloom, was distributed by United Artists. It was not 20th Century Fox. And another movie that they, in fact, were responsible for distributing was a film called A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich. And, Paul Winfield and Cicely Tyson, they would work together again in many other productions, one of which was the film I just mentioned, A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich. But also they played Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife in the miniseries King from 1978. But they've worked together on a number of occasions. But going back to Mattel, going back to Mattel. So those were the only movies that really existed that were basically Mattel productions. And in 2013, Mattel launched Playground Productions, in-house film studio to handle multimedia productions and foster creative storytelling for its brands for global multi-platform distribution. Its first animated project was Team Hot Wheels: The Origin of Awesome. But okay, so I know what you're thinking. Why are you talking about Mattel, during Sounder? Well, it needs to be said. This year, this summer, this July, we are going to have a feature-length version of Barbie with Margot Robbie, who is currently one of the most beloved actresses right now because of films like Wolf of Wall Street and I, Tonya, which is a personal favorite of mine. And also it's got Ryan Gosling as Ken. So, but if you think it's going to stop there, oh, no, 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 no. It is most certainly not going to stop there. But they were largely responsible for releasing all those. Mattel was the film division was responsible for like Monster High and stuff like that. But in 2025, we're going to have a Hot Wheels production that's going into effect. And there was something else that's being released next year that is Mattel related. But yeah, look forward to Barbie and Hot Wheels, and like I said, I can't think of the other things coming. But yeah, we got some big Mattel productions coming. So they're I think they're trying to be their own Marvel thing now. Who knows? Barbie's going to have to be some kind of satire. It's going to have to be some kind of satire. Otherwise, I just don't think I would bother with it. But anyway, enough of the Mattel films. Let's get back to Sounder here. So how did I discover Sounder? Well, let me tell you the story. 15 years ago, well, actually, I should go even further back than that. But when I was growing up, I mean, we had in our household the Leonard Maltin film and video guide, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with as well. And of course, even though that movie was supposed to be a reference book where you look up different movies at different times, and usually it would be in there. Yeah, sure, there were some like extreme horror films that never made it into the book, like I won't go into those, but I mean, yeah, I mean, sure, there was like a few extreme titles that never made it, but chances are, if you picked up that book, there would be a review from Leonard Maltin in that book, or rather, his editors. But the Sounder films both got exceptional praise. And yes, I'm talking about Sounder, the original. He gave it a perfect 4-star rating. Same thing as Roger Ebert also gave Sounder a perfect 4-star rating. But the difference is that Roger Ebert did not like the sequel and gave it 2 stars. And Leonard Maltin really liked the sequel and gave it 3.5 stars. In fact, he liked it almost as much as the first movie. And so I thought to myself, wow, these Sounder films sound pretty awesome. I got to check them out sometime, but they were largely unavailable. Sure, there were VHS copies out there, and I just could not find them. I think, in our blockbusters, I don't think that Sounder was a prominent rental at any point, which is really a shame. But it wasn't until 2008 when I got a job writing for DVD Verdict. And even though we weren't paid, we were compensated with free movies on physical media. So, of course, it was like, oh, awesome, And Sounder had finally gotten it actually got a DVD release before. It did have an initial DVD release in 2002, which I can't vouch for the visual and audio quality for that one. But when it finally got re-released in 2008, I did review it. And in fact, I gave the acting, the story, and the overall judgment of Sounder a 100 score. Video and audio were pretty good. This was not exactly reference quality. This was not Criterion quality, which is what Sounder really deserves. But when I reviewed it, this was a long time coming. I had been wanting to see Sounder for so long that I was actually very surprised at, the fact that I didn't predict what was going to happen. And in fact, I found it a very absorbing watch from beginning to end. John A. Alonzo's cinematography of Depression era Louisiana is just outstanding. Definitely one of the highlights, and he should have gotten an Oscar nomination as well. This movie could have used a few more Oscar nominations, I think, and maybe even a win or two, but unfortunately that just didn't happen. And of course, this was also the year that it was up against The Godfather, so it didn't really stand any kind of chance, even though Cabaret was supposedly very close because it actually got Best Director. Now, this film was directed by Martin Ritt. Might as well get to the director now. They're reading Huckleberry Finn right here. Why do we not have a decent version of Huckleberry Finn? I know some people like the Elijah Wood movie from the Disney studio in the early 90s, which, probably got as close as anybody else had before in terms of being very faithful to Huckleberry Finn. But I'm still waiting on a proper version, a proper adaptation, like an R-rated adaptation of Huckleberry Finn, because there's still a massive misunderstanding that it's actually a children's book when it's no, it's a very dark satire on society, and it's brilliant. As far as the great American novel is concerned, it's difficult between Huck Finn and Moby Dick for me. I lean towards Moby Dick just because it's Moby Dick. But I finally had the pleasure of listening to Sounder, the audiobook by Avery Brooks, via Audible, and was totally mesmerized by his reading of the book. Absolutely. But going back to Martin Ritt, the director. Very long career. He passed away at the age of 76 in 1990. And some of the films he directed include The Long Hot Summer, 1958, The Black Orchid, Paris Blues, Hemingway's Adventures as a Young Man. One of his more famous films is actually the movie HUD, starring Paul Newman and Melvin Douglas and Brandon DeWilde, and also an Academy Award winner for Patricia Neal for Best Supporting Actress. And he also did The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Hombre, The Great White Hope, Sounder, of course. After Sounder, he directed a movie starring Woody Allen called The Front. which is a great film about the blacklisting controversy in Hollywood in the 1950s. He also directed Norma Ray, which won Sally Field her first Oscar for Best Actress. Cross Creek, Murphy's Romance, also with Sally Field. But the movie that I've seen the most that is directed by Martin Ritt, I was going to share all this with you, is this movie called Nuts. This was directed by Martin Ritt and starring Barbara Streisand and Richard Dreyfuss. And it's based on a play. And Barbara Streisand basically plays a very expensive call girl in New York who is accused of murdering her very abusive client. I mean, he was probably going to kill her, and she had to kill him in self-defense. But her family and thus the court system feel that she's not capable of standing trial. That she needs to be in a hospital and go to a psychiatric hospital, and that she wouldn't be able to assist in her own defense. Well, Barbara Streisand proves them all wrong when she gets a lawyer played by Richard Dreyfuss. And it's a very underrated film. And it's not a film that, like a lot of other films with Barbara Streisand, where she directed, because she didn't direct this one. There's very little music, and I love what little music there is from Streisand in this movie. But as an actor's showcase, you can't go wrong. And, you also have Eli Wallach. You have James Whitmore as the judge. He played Brooks in Shawshank Redemption. You have Robert Webber in his final film, Carl Malden in his final film. That was a huge deal for him. But yeah, if you've never seen Nuts, highly recommend it. I know it's a completely different film than Sounder, but of all the Martin Ritt films I've seen, that's the one I've seen the most times. And he's been, he was nominated for the Palme d'Or for Long Hot Summer, and nominated for a bunch of Golden Globes and everything. Never won an Oscar, though. Never won an Oscar. In fact, he has never been nominated for an Oscar. He's been nominated for like Directors Guild Awards and Golden Globes. Oh, he was nominated for Best Director for HUD. Yeah, for HUD, the 1963 film. And this was not his only 1972 film. He also directed a film the same year called Pete and Tilly, which starred Walter Matthau and Carol Burnett. And I decided to, unfortunately, pass on that one to do a commentary for. But hey, I mean, if anybody out there wants me to do a commentary for Pete and Tilly, I'll definitely consider it. Yeah, I'll definitely consider it. Yeah, and his last film was in 1990, which is called Stanley and Iris, which starred Jane Fonda and Robert De Niro. Yeah. So he made about 20 films, 20 studio films over the course of his career. And, I think this and HUD and Nuts, if I was going to choose three of them, it would be Sounder, HUD, and Nuts as the three Martin Ritt films that everybody should check out. Yeah. And here we have our musician, who is Taj Mahal, an American blues musician, still with us. He is 80 years old, born May 17th, 1942. And he's an American blues musician, plays the guitar, piano, banjo, harmonica, many others, often incorporating elements of world music into his work. Has done much to reshape the definition of scope of blues music over the course of his more than 50-year career by fusing it with non-traditional forms, including sounds from the Caribbean, Africa, India, Hawaii, and South Pacific. He chose the stage name Taj Mahal from dreams he had about Mahatma Gandhi, India, and social tolerance. He started using the stage name in 1959 or 1961, around the same time he began attending the University of Massachusetts. despite having attended a vocational agricultural school, becoming a member of the National FFA organization, and majoring in animal husbandry and minoring in veterinary science and agronomy. Mahal decided to pursue music instead of farming. In college, he had led a rhythm and blues band called Taj Mahal and the Electras. Before heading for the U.S. West Coast, he was also part of a duo with Jessie Lee Kincaid. In 1964, he formed Rising Suns with fellow blues rock musicians Ry Cooder and Jessie Lee Kincaid, landing a record deal with Columbia Records soon after. Now, I'm going to stop about Taj Mahal for a minute to say that, yeah, this is a very, very hard scene to watch. And in the book, it's actually hard to listen to. And not just because, of course, in the book they tend to use the N word a bit more than in the movie. In fact, I don't think the N word is used anywhere in Sounder, and whether that would have affected its rating or not, I don't know. But I will say that there was a movie that came out in 1969 that was PG called Tick, 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 Tick. And that utilized the N word at certain moments. But then again, it was a Southern drama about race relations in the South and everything. And so it was kind of expected. But this, I mean, they keep it fairly clean in the movie a little bit more than in the book, because the book, you could feel the violence coming on at certain points, and it's just terrifying to think of what this family, as well as many other black families at the time, and still do to an extent. And this is also a very hard scene to watch, where basically that Sounder, the dog, gets shot. When I first saw this, I literally thought it was going to be more like a boy and his dog story. Like, because back in the 90s, we had so many of those movies, Far From Home, The Adventures of Yellow Dog, and I expected Sounder to be one of those type of movies. And boy, I was wrong. Yeah, I was really, really wrong about that. Yeah, here, just bask into John A. Alonzo's cinematography here for a minute. And this was all filmed on location in Louisiana. But going back to Taj Mahal, he stayed with Columbia for his solo career, releasing the self-titled Taj Mahal and the Natural Blues in 1968. His track Statesboro Blues was featured on side 2 of the very successful Columbia CBS sampler album The Rock Machine Turns You On, giving a huge impetus to his career. Giant Step, The Old Folks at Home with session musician Jesse Ed Davis followed in 1969. During this time, he and Cooder worked with the Rolling Stones, with whom he has performed at various times throughout his career. In 1968, he performed in the film The Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. He recorded a total of 12 albums for Columbia from the late 60s to the 70s. His work in the 70s was especially important, and that his releases began incorporating West Indian and Caribbean music, jazz, and reggae into the mix. In 1972, he acted in and wrote the film score for the movie Sounder. He reprised his role and returned as composer in the sequel Part 2 Sounder. Yeah, he was only one of two people that successfully transferred over from the original to the sequel. And like I said, we'll talk about the sequel later. We got a lot to talk about in terms of the sequel. Stalled in his career, he decided to move to Kua, Hawaii in 1981, soon formed the Hua Blues Band, originally just a group of guys laying together for fishing and a good time. The band soon began performing regularly and touring. He maintained a low public profile in Hawaii throughout most of the 80s before recording Taj in 1988 for Gramavision. This started a comeback of sorts for him, recording both for Gramavision and Hannibal Records during this time. And in June of 2017, he appeared in the award-winning documentary film The American Epic Sessions, recording Charlie Patton's High Water Everywhere. on the first electrical sound recording system from the 1920s. Mahal appeared throughout the accompanying documentary series American Epic, commenting on the 1920s rural recording artists who had a profound influence on American music and on him personally. And I wanted to read those, especially because considering this movie is set in the early 1930s, specifically 1933 in Louisiana. Yeah, he knows. Yeah, he is an expert on 1920s rural recordings and the music of that time. Absolutely. So, but like I said, he's still with us. He's still absolutely with us, and he leads with his thumb and middle finger when finger picking, rather than with his index finger, as the majority of guitar players do. Quote: "I play with a flat pick," he says, "when I do a lot of blues leads." Earlier in his musical career, Mahal studied the various styles of his favorite blues singers, including musicians like Jimmy Reed, Son House, Sleepy John Estes, Big Mama Thornton, Howlin' Wolf, Mississippi John Hurt, and Sonny Terry. He has received 10 nominations for Grammy Awards, and he's won 3 over his career. He won Best Contemporary Blues Album for Senior Blues in 97, Best Contemporary Blues Album for Shoutin' in Key in 2000, and Historical Album of the Year for the Essential Taj Mahal Blues Music Awards in 2006. And he won another Grammy Award in 2018 for Best Contemporary Blues Album for Tajmo. Wow. And in 2014, he received the American Music Association's Lifetime Achievement Award. So, yeah, still making music and still working in his 80s. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, Taj Mahal, very important. Now, this scene when Cicely Tyson shows up to see her husband, I will never forget when I first watched this and how the sheriff, of course, a very racist sheriff, decided to slightly adjust the fan so that not one bit of the fan would hit her, despite the fact that she's, sweating profusely and, almost might pass out from heat stroke at any time. And yet, like, the sheriff doesn't even have that much compassion to, like, give her the fan for a while and cool off, just not even that respect right there. And of course, he declines her request so that she could see her husband, which is very sad as well. And on top of all that, she's going to be chastised by this white store owner, who we later find out is a farmer that has been employing Paul Winfield for sharecropping. And now how he's like nervous and upset that with him in prison doing hard labor for the highest crime of all, which is stealing from a white man. God. But I mean, this just feels all too accurate. It feels all too accurate of what life was like at the time in 1930s Louisiana. I mean, you got to remember, this is during the Great Depression. And pretty much in all instances, blacks got hit harder than whites a lot of times. So, yeah, this is definitely a family living on the edge of total despair and poverty and everything. And it just, you're automatically absorbed by what they're going through. And Cicely Tyson is just, beautiful in this scene. How she takes all this. She passed away on January 28th, 2021. So she just passed away a couple years ago. But her career spanned more than 7 decades in film, television, and theater. She became known for her portrayal of strong African-American women. Tyson received various awards, including 3 Emmys, a Screen Actors Guild Award, a Tony Award, an Honorary Academy Award, and a Peabody Award. She appeared in minor film and television and early in her career, garnered widespread attention and critical acclaim for her performance as Rebecca Morgan in Sounder. She was nominated for the Academy Award and Golden Globe for her work. Tyson's portrayal of the title role in the 1974 television film The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, based on the 1971 novel of the same name by Ernest J. Gaines, won her further praise. Among other accolades, the role won her 2 Emmy Awards and a nomination for a BAFTA Award for Best Actress in a Leading Role. She received another Emmy Award nomination for her role as Binta in the acclaimed series Roots, 1977. Tyson continued to work to act on film and television in the 20th century in projects such as Fried Green Tomatoes, A Lesson Before Dying, Because of Winn-Dixie, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, The Help, The Trip to Bountiful, and Last Flag Flying in 2017, directed by Richard Linklater, which I'll be talking about Last Flag Flying a bit more later on when I do my commentary for The Last Detail, because the same author wrote that book and meant it as a spiritual sequel to The Last Detail. But anyway, and she also played the recurring role of Ophelia Harkness in the ABC legal drama TV series How to Get Away with Murder. And since the show's inception in 2014, for which she was nominated for the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Drama Series. She received a Vernon Rice Award in 1962 for her off-Broadway performance in Moon on a Rainbow Shawl. Tyson also starred as Carrie Watts in the Broadway play The Trip to Bountiful, winning the Tony Award, the Outer Critics Award, and the Drama Desk Award for Best Actress in a Play in 2013. Yep. And sadly, she passed away at the age of 96. She was 96 years old, and she passed away on January 28th of 2021. But long career, long life for the lovely Cicely Tyson. And, well, now we have little Kevin Hooks right here, who has become a director, as a matter of fact. But, yeah, in this film, he was 13 years old. I'm going to say about 13 years old. When he was still 10, he starred in the acclaimed JT, a 1969 episode of the CBS Children's Hour about a sensitive Harlem youth who befriends a sick cat. It was written by Jane Wagner, who is now Lily Tomlin's partner, and it was a Peabody Award winner. He also appeared in the hit 1972 movie Sounder as the preteen elder son of Paul Winfield's and Cicely Tyson's characters, providing the point of view of the film. He held the story together as a boy thrust into being, quote, man of the family on a sharecropping farm during the Depression. The adults were nominated for Best Actor and Best Actress Oscars, respectively, for their performances. Hooks won a role in the last film directed by Gordon Parks Jr., who we will be talking about a little bit later because we'll be doing a commentary on Shaft. Well, his last film was a 1975 film called Aaron Loves Angela in 1975. Set in contemporary Harlem at New York's grittiest and most depressing ebb, the film was regarded as a blaxploitation version of Romeo and Juliet, using African-American and Puerto Rican ethnicity in lieu of medieval families. While playing a withdrawn teenager, Kevin Hooks created electricity opposite the 15-year-old Irene Cara, the late Irene Cara. Jose Feliciano in a bit part and a little comic relief lighten the grimness as the young lovers encounter nothing but intolerance, and the secret location where they meet becomes the site of a dangerous drug deal. The movie was popular locally and praised by fans, but widely considered a weakly plotted failure. Hooks went on to portray high school basketball player Morris Thorpe in the successful TV series about a high school basketball, The White Shadow, which ran from 1978 to 1981. Morris Thorpe was reported to be voted one of America's funniest characters in the history of television. And in 1986, he starred in the short-lived ABC sitcom He's the Mayor. In 1991, Hooks directed the film Strictly Business and also appeared in one scene opposite Kim Coles. He directed Wesley Snipes in Passenger 57. Very, very true. The child actor from Sounder later went on to direct Wesley Snipes in Passenger 57. And he also directed Fled with Lawrence Fishburne and Stephen Baldwin, which was basically a 90s update of the Defiant Ones. Wasn't very good, but and also Patrick Swayze in the movie Black Dog. Hooks worked as a director and producer on the series Prison Break. He also directed 2 episodes of the first season of Lost, White Rabbit, and Homecoming. In 2003, he decided to revisit Sounder by directing a television version for The Wonderful World of Disney with Paul Winfield, his co-star from the original, playing the teacher this time. Now, I decided to not bother with that version. I mean, I just decided not to bother with it, and of course we'll explain that. I mean, I tried to find Sounder Part 2 to watch because I'd rather watch that version, but I wasn't able to find it. So there you go. Oh yeah, and this scene where Kevin Hooks comes in with the cake, and like the cop has to, put the knife in there, which is probably dirty as hell. It's like, oh, come on, man. I mean, just the simple act of bringing your father a cake has to be compromised by, these racist. God. Mm. So yeah, and in 2020, Kevin Hooks actually directed an episode of The Good Lord Bird, which is focusing on John Brown's attack on American slavery. The series was created and executive produced by Ethan Hawke and Mark Richard, produced by Jason Blum through Blumhouse Television. Really? Did it have a good response? It did, 98%. Ethan Hawke dazzles in The Good Lord Bird, an epically irreverent adaptation that does right by its source material's good word. Wow. And so Kevin Hooks actually directed several episodes of that. Now, here's what I wrote in 2008 when Sounder hit DVD for the first time. Let's dissect what Sounder is about. The title is the name of the family's hound dog, which would suggest this is some kind of boy and his dog tale in the tradition of Lassie, Shiloh, and Far From Home, The Adventures of Yellow Dog. Assumptions aside, the dog isn't a primary character and he's hardly alluded to in the second half of the film. Instead, the dog acts more like a symbol in terms of the Morgans' strength and perseverance. When Nathan is taken away by the police, Sounder runs after him and gets shot by the arresting officer. Disappearing into the woods, Sounder doesn't return for several days. And when he does reappear and takes the 20-minute journey with David, he's only occasionally seen or mentioned. And I wrote, for several minutes, I was seriously afraid the film would cheat itself by having the dog lead David to his father. And thankfully, that never happened. As characters, the Morgans must deal with a double challenge: poverty and adversity. Even though the Civil War had long ended, blacks were hardly free and still worked as slaves, just in a different capacity. And in the Morgans' case, it's sharecropping. And I did, in fact, I mean, the movie does, in fact, quote W.E.B. Du Bois. I need to double check. I don't want to mess up his name. W.E.B. Du Bois. Mm-hmm. I believe that's how they say it in the movie Sounder too, but call me out on that if that's not true. But but I did write because I actually read him in college. The problem of the 20th century is the color line, and that is very, very true. The families like the Morgans had to bow down to white authority just so they can get what they need. Freedom wasn't a right, it was a privilege, even a blessing. Many small, subtle moments emphasize the Morgans' place in society, but only enough to allow young viewers to understand the reality of the situation. Little things such as the sheriff slightly adjusting his fan away from Rebecca speak volumes of the whites' limited tolerance for blacks at the time, and they are appropriately etched into the screenplay without running towards moralizing or preaching. Acclaimed director Martin Ritt guides this film both professionally and passionately. Ritt gives the film a smooth, natural pace, and to add to the film's authenticity, he shot on location down in Louisiana with stunning work courtesy of cameraman John A. Alonzo. The endless fields of grain and 1930s atmosphere are beyond glorious, visually nailing not only landscape splendor, but of the harsh economic recession. I can even imagine what Sounder looked like on the big screen as its backdrops seem to go off forever with fine focus and devoted detail. It would be impossible to discuss Sounder's greatness without touching upon the award caliber performances across the board, such as Cicely Tyson and now, I said before that the original distributor of Sounder was 20th Century Fox. Uh, I don't know who released the initial 2002 DVD, but the 2008 DVD was from Coke Media. And I gave them an overall decent score as far as their visual presentation is concerned, but it was very clear that they did not have access to the original vault materials. And thus, Sounder since then has needed a restoration. It's needed not only a restoration, but a proper Blu-ray release, which, you know, I think that Criterion is the ideal place for Sounder, and probably if they can actually find the sequel, they could really, throw that in as well. I mean, after all, they released Criterion had released Shaft and Shaft's big score in a double Blu-ray. Why can't we do that for the Sounder films? Seriously. So yeah, what is up with this mysterious Sounder Part 2? Well, before we start talking about that, we are at the 48-minute mark. We are we are approximately 48 minutes into Sounder. All right. So, yeah, in 1976, there was actually a sequel called Part 2 Sounder. As a matter of fact, it wasn't Sounder Part 2. It was literally Part 2, comma, Sounder, which I know is very, very weird. And there seems to be almost no evidence left of its existence. On YouTube, there's only a 90-second clip. That's it. And in 1976, there was a review from Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times, and he gave it just 2 stars. Quoting his review right here, "It's hard to believe Part 2 Sounder is the work of the same people who made the original Sounder." Remember, he gave the original 4 stars, perfect rating. "The first film was so immediate, so real and affecting that the sequel seems all the more flat and contrived. It's not a bad film. It looks good and was made with care, and the actors are convincing. But it's simply not a compelling experience. Events move more so slowly, and the film structure is so loose that we finally lose interest. Perhaps some of the problem is with the screenplay, which is by Lonnie Elder III, who also wrote the original Sounder. This time, his story seems to take place in a vacuum. The problems don't seem as urgent, the emergencies seem contrived, and the movie tends to come to a dead halt every 15 minutes or so for a musical interlude." The story gives us the same basic characters, poor black sharecroppers in the rural South of perhaps 40 years ago, but it doesn't seem to place them in the same context. In Sounder, they were part of an organic society. In Part 2, they tend to be symbols. The movie's focus, as in the first film, is on the oldest son in the sharecropper family. He's David Lee, bright and articulate, and this time he's concerned because the school has just closed down. One of the themes of Sounder is the fact that the young man David, he wants to get an education, despite the fact that he knows that his family needs him and that they're struggling to survive among racism and a depression. So, but he really longs for an education. The teacher is set to accept a job in Cleveland, but David Lee makes it his business to encourage her to stay, and David Lee's father, Nathan, convinces the neighboring sharecroppers to pitch in and build a new schoolhouse. The problem with this situation is that it's also obviously contrived. There is, for example, a perfectly sound church building that could be used during the week for school classes, but the owner of the church, a white man, refuses to let the sharecroppers use it. Why? The movie never says. And the sharecroppers never ask. If the question were confronted, you see the story would move in a different direction. The school has to be built in a hurry because the teacher has just 4 weeks to decide on her job offer from Cleveland. But this is contrived, too. It's as if Elder created these fictional difficulties in an attempt to get suspense into a story in any way possible. Some of the film's problems may come from the fact that it started out as a made-for-TV movie. Yeah, the story seems to halt at arbitrary intervals intended for commercials, and there are too many scenes in which Taj Mahal, as a guitar-playing neighbor, plays and sings while everyone just sits around. As a result, Part 2 Sounder is awfully slowly paced. It would make a perfectly acceptable TV movie, but as a feature film, it's just not in the same class with its namesake. Well, like I said, Leonard Maltin disagreed because he gave it 3.5 stars. And there's only one other review. At IMDb, there's no reviews whatsoever. No user reviews whatsoever for Part 2 of Sounder. But if you go to IMDb and look in external reviews, which are the critics' reviews, there's only two that pop up. And except for Taj Mahal and Sylvia Kumba Williams, none of the original cast appear in the sequel. Even the dog, for whom the original film is named, is absent. That's another thing that needed to be exemplified as well. There is one other external review from Peter Hansen. Here again, how he managed to see the movie, I have no idea. But this is what he wrote. Pity the filmmakers responsible for good sequels to great films, particularly when major cast members disappear between installments, because review of such pictures inevitably begins with provisios about diminishing returns. So it is with Sounder Part 2, a solid picture that pales only in comparison to its extraordinary predecessor, Sounder, one of the most admired 70s explorations of the African-American experience. In Sounder Part 2, capable performers Harold Sylvester and Ebony Wright replace original stars Paul Winfield and Cicely Tyson, while an Annazette Chase assumes Janet McLaughlin's role as a rural school teacher. All three do fine work, perhaps better than the rehashed storyline deserves. In the first film, a child named David strives to gain an education while his family endures the hardships of sharecropping in Depression-era Louisiana. In the second film, roughly the same thing happens. Despite his family's challenging circumstances, David, played by Daryl Young instead of the first film's Kevin Hooks, tries to better himself through formal schooling. Alas, his one-time tutor, Camille, plans to move to Cleveland, and so no one has come forward to assume her responsibilities. David's father, Nathan Lee, resolves to build a school and talk Camille into remaining. Give or take a few details, that's the whole story, which means the film is as unadorned and as devoid of real conflict as it sounds. Sounder Part 2 is a simply homily about simple homily about determination and dignity. Mhm. By keeping the plot uncluttered, however, the filmmakers are able to dig deep during key moments. A particular note is a climactic debate between Camille and Nathan Lee, a beautifully rendered vignette of personal revelation delivered with grace and power by actors who imbue their dialogue and physicality with real emotion. In fact, the acting in Sounder Part 2 is uniformly good. Although Winfield's rawness and vulnerability give the original film an impact the sequel cannot match. That said, the sequel looks great with credibly ramshackle locations bathed in golden light, and real-life blues musician Taj Mahal, reprising his minor supporting role as Nathan Lee's neighbor, gives the soundtrack balance and grit with his evocative tunes. So what it sounds like to me, because I've tried looking for Sounder Part 2 back then and now, can't find it anywhere. I think I've searched every corner of the internet and I just wasn't able to find it. So if it does exist, it would have to be the vault materials or who owns the rights, which actually at this point it's impossible to say who owns the rights to Sounder. But it sounds like the sequel is more or less a remake, but a bit more musicalized. A lot more of Taj Mahal's music, and here again, like Roger Ebert said, a contrived storyline to keep everything moving forward. But I've always still been interested in it. Here again, largely because, like I said, Leonard Maltin in his book gave high praise to both movies, even the sequel. He gave 3.5 stars to the sequel, and the review I just read makes it sound like it's actually pretty good on its own terms, even though it used to be a made-for-TV movie. What exactly happened, we will probably never know. And here again, if the sequel does eventually show itself, who knows? But that's what I'm saying is that I think they should release Sounder on Blu-ray and then give Part 2 at least a bonus consideration if it can be found. But who knows if it still exists anymore? Who knows if it still exists? Well, I hope you all are enjoying the commentary tonight. We are about, let's do a timestamp here real quick. We are at 56 minutes. 56 minutes into Sounder. We're about a little over halfway through. Now, the actress that plays the woman who helps him, I need to talk about her real quick because she's about to disappear from the picture. Yeah, Carmen Matthews, who plays Mrs. Rita Boatwright. She was only in a few other films. She was in Butterfield 8 with is it? Oh yeah, that is the Elizabeth Taylor movie. I was going to say, yeah. She was in that movie, Butterfield 8. Then she was also in an episode of The Twilight Zone, A Rage to Live, 1965, Rabbit Run in 1970, and Goggin the Savage in 1980. And her last film was a movie called Daniel, which nobody really remembers, but with Timothy Hutton. Yeah, always looked like an interesting film to me, but I've never seen it. But Carmen Matthews, her Shakespearean roles included Ophelia in Hamlet and the Queen in Richard II. Her film credits I just listed, but she also had 6 episodes of Alfred Hitchcock's Presents, as well as roles in a 1961 episode of The Twilight Zone, a 1964 episode of The Fugitive, and a 1972 episode of Cannon. One of her more memorable televised performances is as Colonel Lillian Rayborn on episode 150 of MASH. Toward the end of her career, in 1990, she was cast in The Last Best Year with Mary Tyler Moore and Bernadette Peters. In 1975, Matthews set up and ran a residential summer camp for disadvantaged children on her 100-acre farm in Redding, Connecticut. Toward the end of her life, Matthews, a passionate environmentalist, made a perpetual donation of her 100-acre New Pond farm to the Redding Land Trust to ensure that it would retain its woods, fields, pond, and marsh. The United Nations Association of the United States of America named Matthews one of Connecticut's outstanding women in 1987. She died at her farm in Redding, Connecticut in 1995 at the age of 84 from undisclosed causes. And that was Carmen Matthews, who plays Rita Boatwright in the film, who helps out the family in terms of tracking down their father and husband. And soon little Kevin Hooks here is going to go off in search of his father. He has a general idea now where to go. And so now his mom is giving him food and all that stuff to go find him. There's Taj Mahal again. Anybody out in the chat, please be sure to say hi if you've seen Sounder before. Please let me know what you think, and I'll be sure to share it on screen with everybody. But I hope everyone is enjoying tonight's commentary for Sounder. And like I said, this will be the first of several Black History commentaries I do for the month of February. Upcoming, I'm going to be doing Shaft next Friday night, and then next Saturday night. Next Friday, the 24th, Friday night, I'm going to do Shaft. And next Saturday, the 25th, I'm going to do Superfly. So just to give you an idea of the other movies I shall be doing in celebration of Black History Month. But I knew I had to do Sounder. I mean, I had seen it before. You know, I love it. It's a great film. Other people need to see it. Other people need to read the book, you know, and it just, we need a Blu-ray release. I don't understand why this film is missing in action. There's no reason for it to be missing in action, particularly as a multi-Oscar nominee. That's the argument I made in my review back in 2008 for the DVD, and I'm making that same argument right now. Sounder is long overdue for a Blu-ray release. Just absolutely long overdue. Now, let me see. The screenwriter who adapted William H. Armstrong's book Sounder, Lonnie Elder III, who also wrote Sounder Part 2, which, like I said, is missing in action itself. But Lonnie Elder III was an American actor, playwright, and screenwriter, was one of the leading African-American figures who informed the New York theater world with social and political consciousness. He also wrote scripts for television and film. His most well-known play, Ceremonies and Dark Old Men, won him a Drama Desk Award for Most Promising Playwright and was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. The play, which was about a Harlem barber and his family, was produced by the Negro Ensemble Company in 1969. In 1973, Elder, along with Suzanne DePass, who co-wrote Lady Sings the Blues, became the first African Americans to be nominated for the Academy Award in Writing. Elder received the Best Adapted Screenplay nomination for the movie Sounder, starring Cicely Tyson, Paul Winfield, and Kevin Hooks. Yeah, Lady Sings the Blues actually, I think, got 4 Oscar nominations as well. So it got just as many as Sounder did. And I'm still going to make the argument. I still think that I would have voted for Diana Ross over Liza Minnelli. I definitely do think so. In the blaxploitation era, Elder scripted the most challenging example of the genre, a noir-infused crime melodrama called Melinda, and it starred actors Calvin Lockhart and Rosalind Cash. In 1980, Elder and his wife became a third child of the family, a daughter they named Lonnie Christine. The following year, his collaboration with Richard Pryor resulted in the screenplay for Bustin' Loose. Oh, and that movie had Cicely Tyson in it with Richard Pryor. Yeah. Really good, really funny comedy from the early 80s. A comic tale of an ex-felon who finds redemption through driving a busload of handicapped children to a farmland oasis. The movie received mixed reviews. He wrote A Woman Called Moses, the biographical TV miniseries of a fugitive slave leader, Harriet Tubman's life, reuniting him with Cicely Tyson and featuring narration by Orson Welles. A Woman Called Moses garnered Elder the Writers Guild of America Award and his second Christopher Award. In the 1980s, Elder became disillusioned with Hollywood, perhaps a result of his efforts to change the way Black people were depicted in films and TV. He was kept on the payroll by studio employers, but denied work on important projects. They decided that they were going to teach me a lesson, and for 2 years I couldn't get arrested, he told the Washington Post. Elder returned to the theater, bringing Splendid Mummer to the American Place Theater in New York, starring Charles S. Dutton, a monodrama about the 19th century life of the first African-American Shakespearean actor, Ira Frederick Aldridge. And Splendid Mummer was revived in 2007 at the Old Vic in London. In 1990, he was called to rewrite the book version of King, a British musical about the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Lon Elder died in Woodlands, California in 1996 after a long illness. But essentially, the only films that he wrote were Sounder, Part 2 Sounder, Melinda, and Bustin' Loose, the one with Richard Pryor. Now, Melinda, what was Melinda about? Oh, yeah, that that had Calvin Lockhart and Rosalind Cash. There we go. And so this is a very intense scene right here. And it's actually, I think, along with the arrest, I think this is one of the few scenes with, any overt violence or anything, because this is a G-rated movie. And I think, they were satisfied with the violence being kept at a minimum. But I mean, this could have been a lot stronger, I guess you could say, in terms of the violent content. But they wanted to keep it family friendly. They wanted to make sure that everybody, regardless of their age, could come and see this movie, despite the horrible situation and the horrible history, of course, that we're still dealing with. But Sounder is a film that I think should be shown in schools. I think it should be shown in schools as well as the book being read in schools. And, it's sad that there's, those without education degrees that feel the need that, well, no, we're just going to take all this out of public schools. No, we're not. No, these books and these movies need to be treasured and shown and discussed. And that's what I'm saying is that, for a film that we can teach in the public school system, we could at least have a decent Blu-ray of it. We could at the very, very least have that. Now, the release of Sounder, it opened on September 24th, 1972 at the Embassy and Plaza Theaters in New York City. When the film was released on VHS, Paramount Home Video assumed distribution rights. Sounder received critical acclaim, with reviewers praising it as a welcome antidote to the contemporaneous wave of Black films, most of which were considered of low quality in budget and exploitative. The film's depiction of a loving family was hailed as a banner accomplishment for Black filmmakers and audiences. Variety wrote that the picture has been, quote, for good or ill, singled out to test where the Black audience will respond to serious films about the Black experience rather than the super Black exploitation features. Some of Sounder's success was due to its innovative marketing strategy. Fox focused on group sales in major cities and targeted religious organizations and schools, Radnitz personally visited 35 cities and held over 500 screenings, with 60 simultaneous sneak previews held in New York City. The religious establishment came out in favor of the film, with an endorsement by the Catholic Film Office and a study guide for religious educators created by the National Council of Churches. The Variety article noted that Fox wrote a study guide prepared by Dr. Roscoe Brown Jr., director of Afro-American Affairs at New York University. 20th Century Fox spent over $1 million promoting the film, according to Variety. John Simon wrote, quote, "Sounder is a rare, honest movie about people who work the soil under conditions of extreme rigor. Sounder is also a rare, honest Hollywood movie about blacks, making it virtually unique." Based on 20 reviews, Sounder holds a 90% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. In his Family Guide to Movies on Video, Henry Hooks wrote, "Sounder captures the humanity of its characters and a fine, distant sense of its sleepy southern locale. The movie earns a deep emotional response from its audience because its appealing story and characters are believable. Not only a valid examination of the Black experience in America, it is also a fine family experience." He added that the boy's search for his father, quote, "provides additional drama," and the film critic Roger Ebert gave the film 4 stars out of 4, stating that, quote, "This is a film for the family to see." Both Gene Siskel and Ebert placed the film on their 10 best lists of 1972. And despite popular skepticism that the film would not be a financial success, the picture was a major box office hit. It grossed $27,000 from 2 theaters in its opening week and grossed 30% more the following week. Made for less than $1 million, it grossed just under $17 million, generating $9 million of theatrical rentals in the United States and Canada in 1973, and it was the 10th highest grossing movie of 1972. Yeah. So somebody along the way in the next couple of years said sequel, but they probably said it too late because they were unable to get anybody else from the original except for Taj Mahal, who, like I said, did the music score. And we are now 1 hour and 13 minutes. 1 hour and 13 minutes into Sounder. And we have about roughly 32 minutes left to go. So we're getting there. Yeah. Yeah, this very kind teacher that takes Kevin Hooks home here. Yeah, and the teacher is played by an actress named Janet McLaughlin, and yeah, here she is right here, you know, showing Kevin Hooks all the books in her library and everything, including, you know, some very important Black writers and you know, Harriet Tubman among many others. And this, of course, you know, sparks his goal even more of wanting to get into education, you know, just keep on reading books and, you know, learning everything that was, you know, suppressed in terms of, you know, excuse me, I'm sorry. And this is Louisiana, which, like I said, you know, during the Great Depression and everything, it was just, you know, what a way to live. Oh, man. And here she is reading W.E.B. Du Bois, who I talked about earlier and quoted with, you know, the problem of the 20th century is the color line. And that's what I'll never forget from reading about W.E.B. But Janet McLaughlin, who plays the teacher right here, she had roles in television series like The Rockford Files and Alias and All in the Family and The Golden Girls. She's best remembered for her key supporting part in the film Sounder, where she played Camille Johnson, a young teacher. And she's worked with numerous well-known actors and actresses and celebrities such as Jim Brown, James Earl Jones, Maya Angelou, and Morgan Freeman. A one-time contract player for Universal Studios, McLaughlin made her debut in 2 episodes of The Alfred Hitchcock Hour in 1965. She appeared in episodes of The Fugitive, The Invaders, Girl from U.N.C.L.E., Star Trek, Ironside, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Wonder Woman, and The Mod Squad. And she was also in a film that I mentioned before called Tick, 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 which I mentioned is from 1969 and set in the South as well. She was also in Clint Eastwood's Tightrope, Murphy's Law, The Boy Who Could Fly, and one of her last movies was actually in 1999 called 13th Floor. If you all remember that, that was her last film role in 1999. But she was also in actually, that's about it. I mean, she only made about 10 movies or so. She was also in Heart and Souls, the 1993 film with Robert Downey Jr. and Charles Grodin and Keira Sedgwick. But aside from that, not many other big films. But, and she passed away in 2010 at the age of 77. But, you know, I think it's fair to say that she will always be remembered as the very kind-hearted school teacher who takes in Kevin Hooks in Sounder. I know I should keep saying his name is David Lee Morgan, but yeah, I just keep looking at him as Kevin Hooks. The only other movie I've seen Kevin Hooks in is he has a very small part in the 1987 film Inner Space, directed by Joe Dante. He's actually in the newspaper office with Orson Bean, of all people. And they're talking about the cowboy, and Meg Ryan like basically says goodbye to him and everything. But he's only in a couple scenes. He's like in a later scene where she calls him up and say he needs to get help and everything. You know, yeah, I mean, yeah, he didn't do much in Inner Space, but you know, like I said, he went on to become a director himself with Passenger 57 and several other films. Quite amazing. Quite amazing. Let's see. We are, 1 hour and 18 minutes in. 1 hour and 18 minutes. So we have approximately 27 minutes to go. 27 minutes to go until we finish Sounder. Let's see if there's anything else I'm missing here. I've already talked about the sequel in detail and how it's non-existent. But here again, I would be more than open to getting a Blu-ray release with the sequel in there. So that's what I'm saying. If you're gonna release Sounder in a limited edition Blu-ray, you might as well make it the complete Sounder package. I mean, granted, there is the made-for-television movie from 2003, directed by Kevin Hooks, which I don't know if that's available on Disney Plus. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But see, I look at a movie like that. I look at a movie like that as something like there's different versions of The Miracle Worker out there. I mean, to me, I will always love the original version from '62 with Anne Bancroft and oh God, Patty Duke, Sean Astin's mother. Yeah, there you go. And you know, they made one version in '62 from the same director as Bonnie and Clyde, which is of course the absolute best one. Very, very, very memorable. And then they made a Disney version in 2000 or something like that. And you see, I look at something like that as being, okay, let's just do another familiar television version of the story, even though there's, of course, a much better version out there already, you know, even though the '62 version is in black and white and everything. But I don't know. I probably should have given the Sounder remake a chance. I mean, or new adaptation. I probably should have given it a chance just because Kevin Hooks directed it. But Yeah, I just didn't go that far. Let's see. Mhm. And Cicely Tyson commented in a TCM interview that director Martin Ritt's cinematographer, while shooting the famous homecoming sequence with Tyson and co-star Paul Winfield, was so moved by their performances that he was certain he missed framing the action properly in the shots and respectfully asked them to do the difficult scene again. They obliged, but later examination of daily rushes revealed that they got the shot and acting perfect the first time around, and the first take was a print. Amazing, just amazing. Cicely Tyson was 15 years older than Paul Winfield. Well, I never would have noticed that. The first film to feature Oscar nominated performances by two black actors, Paul Winfield for Best Actor and Cicely Tyson for Best Actress. This feat wouldn't be achieved again until What's Love Got to Do with It, 21 years later. And the third film to achieve this was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom in 2020. Award-winning composer Alex North did a score for the film that was not used. On July 8th, 2014, Entrada Records released the score, but did not include the replacement score. With this film, Lonnie Elder III became the first African-American and person of color to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. Elder is also the first African-American and person of color to be nominated for screenwriting in general, along with Suzanne DePass, nominated for Lady Sings the Blues. Yeah. In 2021, I have to mention this. In 2021, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And Paul Winfield appeared in another film directed by Martin Ritt, Conrack, co-starring John Voight. So yeah, I mean, here again, I mean, with the selection now being preserved in the Library of Congress, like, we need a Blu-ray of Sounder. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, I just can't believe this film that got multiple Oscar nominations. You know, it was beloved by audiences and critics that saw it and everything. And it just feels like it's been suppressed for the longest time, especially the sequel. I mean, I just don't understand why this movie of all movies can't have a proper Blu-ray. It makes no sense. Well, like I said, we need to find who has the rights and get on them. But I think Criterion should be the one. I think they should. I think they should definitely do it. Got about 22 minutes left here. Let's see. There are only 37 reviews over at IMDb, actually, for Sounder. 10 out of 10, quiet, very quiet. 9 out of 10, beautiful film with great heart. Breathtaking cinematography and excellent performances, 10 out of 10. Morgan Family Values, 10 out of 10. Excellent period piece, 9 out of 10. Ten out of 10. Definitive Depression era family drama with powerful performances from Tyson, Winfield, and Hooks. Great message and representation, yeah. Cicely Tyson is stunning in this underappreciated classic, which deserves better than just being considered school book material. Absolutely. Absolutely. No. See, oh, yeah. Counselor 3004 wrote that in 2019. Sounder is one of the essential American dramas set in the Deep South during the Depression era of the early 30s. And while it has been released more than 45 years ago, it's one of those rare films which absolutely feel like they haven't aged a single bit ever since their release. It has been way ahead of its time, considering that movies with predominantly African American cast members were reserved for action and blaxploitation films back in the days, and also broke ground for the fact that it was the first film. Yeah, both of them are absolutely deserved to their nominations. I know I'm starting to repeat myself here now, but yeah, 10 out of 10, nothing political about it. That's very true. 8 out of 10, excellent, well-made movie, 8 out of 10, beautifully made, 8 out of 10. Like I said, all these are very, very high audience scores. Yep. So aside from this, I have pretty much done commentaries for every film now that has won Oscars in 1972, with just a couple of exceptions. I decided to pass on doing uh, the Poseidon Adventure. I was not really the biggest fan of the Poseidon Adventure. I mean, it won Best Original Song in 72, but aside from that, the only other commentary I plan on doing on a 72 film that won an Oscar is a movie called Travels with My Aunt. I'll talk about that when the time comes, though. But Sounder is pretty much like one of the last films that of the Oscar ceremony in 1972 that I've finished the commentary on. So all the other ones are done. You know, Cabaret, The Godfather, Lady Sings the Blues, all done. And the heart rending moment where Paul Winfield is finally reunited with his family after a separation for several months. And, he was, probably, treated poorly in the prison camp that he got sent to, where, they wouldn't even tell the family where, and of course they had to, resort to rather illegal means to try to find out. But luckily, there were women that really cared about David Lee and his situation, and to help him out. And finally, he's reunited with his father. Yep. Let's see. Yeah, I apologize for going silent. I think I've run out of things to say. Unfortunately, when it comes to Sounder, we are 1 hour, 28 minutes in, so we're getting very close to the end here. Very close to the end. But yeah, looking forward to those new Mattel movies, right? With Barbie and Hot Wheels and what is the other one that's coming out? I know there's another Mattel movie coming out. Masters of the Universe. Yeah, there's a new animated Masters of the Universe movie coming out next year. So, instead of great book adaptations like Sounder, which they did back in the 70s, now we have to deal with Barbie, Masters of the Universe, and Hot Wheels. I mean, they just don't make films like this anymore. It's just an absolute shame. Absolute shame. Well, like I said, anybody watching this that wants to see Sounder on Blu-ray, I would recommend getting out there and contacting Criterion to get on that, because this is about as ideal a Criterion title as there's ever been. And it's just a real shame that even on DVD, it was kind of lackluster in terms of its video and audio visual quality. But yeah. But more people need to see Sounder. So that's what I'm saying. If I highly recommend Sounder. It's one of the best films of '72, next to The Godfather and Cabaret and Lady Sings the Blues. And yeah, and it deserves to be watched by more people. And I just wish the sequel was available to be watched as well, but unfortunately it may never appear again. I mean, you'd probably be lucky enough to catch it on television at this point. But then again, does television really exist anymore? Of course it does, but I mean, yeah, oh man, it's just we got so many options nowadays, and back in the '70s, we only had 3 channels. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's Sounder the dog, safe and sound with his family again. John A. Alonso just, he just shoots all this just beautifully. Wonderful. Like I said, he'll be shooting Chinatown within a year, and I'll look forward to do a commentary on that next year. Yep. I might see the Barbie movie. It's probably not going to have the same quality or rewards as like something like Sounder, but I may see Barbie. Who knows? If they actually convince me with that cast. Oh, wonderful! Last April, I believe, Cicely Tyson. Oh, yeah. The American Film Institute over at Instagram did a 50th, little 50th anniversary tribute to Sounder, and they dug up this interview with Cicely Tyson for all those that want to listen to that. But aside from that, it got very little notice last year. Very little notice. Here we go. This is what I've been looking for to end the commentary on. This article was written February 10th of 2022. It was last year that the classic film Sounder was finally added to the National Film Registry. Many people, myself included, were shocked that it had not been added years ago. Sounder is a classic film that received critical acclaim upon its release and is still acclaimed now. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards and was nominated for yet other awards. It won the National Board of Review Award for Best Actress and the National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Actress for Cicely Tyson. Released at the height of the blaxploitation cycle, Sounder has come to be regarded as a major achievement in black cinema. The movie celebrates its 50th anniversary on September 24th of 2022. To write the screenplay, African-American playwright Lonnie Elder III was contacted. He initially turned it down, but producer Robert B. Radnitz and director Martin Ritt convinced him to work on the film. Mr. Elder wanted to keep the film historically accurate. The film would see some changes from the novel. While the novel appears to be set in Georgia, the film is set in Louisiana, where it was shot on location, St. Helena Parish and East Feliciana Parish, to be exact. Here it must be pointed out that the movie was set to be filmed in Macon, Georgia, but reportedly did not do so due to racial tensions. While the time of the novel is vague as to when it was set, the film is set in the year 1933. While human characters are unnamed in the novel, in the movie they are given names, for example, the family of sharecroppers on the Morgans. Yeah. The film also centers more on the Morgan family and less on the dog Sounder than the novel had. As mentioned earlier, Sounder was on shot in location in Louisiana. Both director Martin Ritt and cinematographer John Alonzo elected to film Sounder as realistically as possible. They took inspiration from photographers Walker Evans and Dorothea Lange, who both documented sharecroppers and farmers during the Great Depression. As hard as it might be to believe, initially Cicely Tyson was not cast as the mother. Initially, she was cast as a school teacher. Martin Ritt offered the role to another actress who turned it down. Cicely Tyson then approached Mr. Ritt about playing the role of the mother. Martin Ritt was reluctant to cast Cicely Tyson, thinking she was, quote, too beautiful. Fortunately, he eventually cast her in the role. Paul Winfield, who had guest starred on several television shows that appeared in the films Last Man and RPM, was cast in the role of the father. Many of the non-supporting roles were played by local people from around St. Helena Parish and East Feliciana Parish. In fact, the judge and the preacher in the film were a judge and preacher in reality, Judge William Thomas Bennett and Reverend Thomas N. Phillips. As mentioned earlier, Sounder would be nominated for several awards, and they also write here that Sounder has been one of my favorite movies since childhood. I grew up on a farm outside a small town. I have always had plenty of black friends. And the movie largely appealed to me because it portrayed an African-American family living in a rural area at a time when most black characters in the media were portrayed as living in big cities. Despite being set in the 30s and lacking much of the technology my friends and I grew up with, the average person did not own a TV set in 1933. That's true. The movie's milieu then seemed much more familiar to me than New York City or Chicago or LA. Even as a boy, I could identify with David Lee Morgan, his love for his dog Sounder, and his love of reading. As I got older, I also appreciated its fine writing, its excellent performances, and its historical accuracy. Indeed, while Sounder is suitable viewing for older children, it does not shy away from the brutal realities of racism in the era. Yep. Sounder isn't only a landmark achievement in black cinema, it is a landmark achievement in American cinema and cinema all over the world. And that was written by Terrence Canody in 2022. Yeah. One of the few people to actually shine a light on Sounder, and that is wonderful. It did get a 50th anniversary screening at the AFI Silver Theater and Cultural Center, however. This was last year, obviously, but yeah, I mean, it did at the very least get that. But most people, I think, were focusing on The Godfather, I think. Oh, man. I mean, like I said, it would have been nice if Sounder had won something, you know. Well, it did. It did win several things, but I mean, it would have been nice if it got an Oscar. It would have been really nice. See, we're 1 hour and 38 minutes and 30 seconds in, and we're going to be closing the movie on this wonderful father-son talk, which will close the curtain on Sounder. So yeah, this was a wonderful movie to do a commentary for, and I'm really, really happy that I did this. And like I said, I mean, hopefully it encourages more people to see it and talk about it and realize that it's a pivotal, seminal work in African American history and literature. Just to let everybody know, in terms of my future commentaries, on Friday night, this Friday night at 11 p.m., I will be doing an audio commentary on the most popular Dutch film ever made, which is a movie called Turkish Delight, directed by Paul Verhoeven, who later directed RoboCop and Total Recall and Starship Troopers and many other films. And it also has a very, very early role for Rutger Hauer. And evidently, it was very controversial when it was released in 1973. And it deals with a lot of eroticism. So very, very different from a movie like Sounder. And on Sunday night, we'll be doing a audio commentary for one of my favorite love stories ever brought to the screen called Dangerous Beauty. And I will be honored to have with me at that time the director of the movie, the producer director of the movie, Marshall Herskovitz, has agreed to join me for an audio commentary for Dangerous Beauty. That is 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday night, the 19th. Hope you all can come out for that as well. And then next week, we will do movies like Shaft and Superfly. The 27th of February, which I believe is the last Sunday, February 26th. On February 26th, I will be doing a group commentary. I'm going to have about 2 or 3 other people join me, and we're going to be talking about the cult classic Dark City, directed by Alex Proyas and starring Rufus Sewell. And then shortly after that, we're going to be doing Save the Tiger. We've already done the movie which won the Best Actress Award of 1973 for A Touch of Class. Glenda Jackson won Best Actress. Well, now we're going to do, at that point, we're going to do Best Actor, which was Jack Lemmon for Save the Tiger. So that will be in early March, probably Friday, March 3rd, I think would probably be the right time for that. And I love this ending right here where, he asks his little brother to carry the bag. She offers to carry the bag. And then he's at the last minute, he's like, because, yeah, I mean, they're going to love and miss his brother while he's off getting this education that he so absolutely values and everything. And it's just, and even though they've had their hardships all throughout this movie in terms of, staying hungry and, keeping their family together and everything, including the dog Sounder, who, here again, not a primary focus, which is amazing, even though it's the title of the movie. So yeah, those are the upcoming audio commentaries for the rest of the month of February. Hope you'll be able to join me for all those. And here's the wonderfully beautiful shot of the ending of Sounder, where Paul Winfield and Kevin Hooks will be going off back to the school so he can get his education. Yeah, wonderful movie, absolutely wonderful movie, a very emotional experience if you've never seen it before, or even if you have seen it before. It's a really, really moving movie. The end. That is the end of Sounder, directed by Martin Ritt, and based on the novel by William H. Armstrong. And here we have a disclaimer: was filmed in its entirety on location in St. Helena and East Feliciana parishes in Louisiana. And they basically thanked the sheriff and everybody that was there during the filming for their wonderful support. Yes, indeed. So, so that is Sounder. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was a wonderful film to watch again and share with all of you and talking about it and everything. I will see you all Friday night at 11 p.m. for my next commentary, which will be Turkish Delight, directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Rutger Hauer. Thank you very much for joining me, and I